Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We have game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final beginning tonight. The Florida Panthers are leading 1-0 after a impressive Sergei Bobrovsky shutout performance, which brought me much glee. But we'll discuss that in a few minutes when Eck joins the show. But we will start, as always, with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so I want to I'm going to give Major League Baseball some credit. You know, before this Mets series, a lot of those London games were kind of a joke. The way the stadium was, like the Yankee game had like 19 runs or something. Yeah. Just a lot of different things. But they seem to have fixed the stadium. And I was watching Twitter on, and I have a lot of friends that are there from Philly and from New York. A lot of people went. And so I was just kind of looking online. And the one thing I'll say is, there were more and I'm a Met fan, right? So I'm looking at Met. There were more Met fans from in different places in the world that I had imagined. And to be honest, I'm not sure why, because they haven't been good in a while. But for whatever reason, they like the colors, they like the owner, maybe they like the player. What the same reasons we all start liking teams when we're young. They probably do have more fans now. Baseball does around the world than they used to. So if that's helping them, I'm fine with it.
Jan, what did you think? Because I didn't watch a minute of it. I had a lot of stuff going on this weekend.
I was heading to see Saturdays, but I saw a good part of yesterday's and was following it. And yeah, look, the place was packed. Supposedly a lot of stuff you read in terms of the players from an interactive perspective did a very good job in terms of interacting, which again, if you're going to grow the game, that's part and parcel of the equation, is having all of the ancillary activities to kind of make it a bit more feeling like home and also engage other fans. I have a couple, like Russ, I have a couple of friends of mine there. One of them ran into Pete Alonso in the street, took a picture with him. There's pictures of other people with Brandon Nimmo and other guys. So, I mean, again, if you're going to grow the game, you need to kind of interact with others. You need to make sure that those who are overseas, and again, the other piece of the puzzle is Russ can attest to, right? If you listen to the ending calls, the British call for the way the game ended was far better than the U.S. call by leaps and bounds in terms of listening to it, right? So,
it was just great.
Gotten individuals who have gotten into the game. What's that?
I'm not going to say who was better, but it was great.
I think there is no question the British call was better, in my opinion. At least that's personal opinion. I mean, just the excitement, just the way he announced it, just the oomph and the emphasis he gave in terms of the way the game ended. I thought it was well done. And because you said, so baseball's done a lot of these global series, right? Mexico City was look, the altitude there doesn't help matters. Balls are going to fly all over the place. Humidor. Right? It's like playing in Vegas with a Super Ball using a metal bat. So
use the humidor.
It's still not going to help there.
No, I know, but I'll just say this: I didn't hear the British call, but if it was anything like the comparison of the opening of the Stanley Cup Final on Sportsnet as opposed to ESPN ABC, then I mean, I'm sorry, it's like for the Canadian viewers here. Sportsnet and HockeyNet in Canada usually have really good openings, and they of course they won me over even more by using Phil Collins in the air tonight as the music. ESPN, ABC's performance and their influence on the opening of the Stanley Cup, which we'll get into in a minute, because I know that
don't talk about that yet.
Eck probably loved it. I thought it was an atrocity.
Well, I had one more thing to mention. This quote of the whole London series was Brett Beatty saying that London was cleaner than New York City. And I think that he probably didn't realize how big of a headline that was going to be. But he's right. So good for him.
No, he is right. Look, you guys know I used to go to London a lot. Haven't gone for years, but I used to go for about a decade, at least 2 to 3 times.
Neither have I.
2 to 3 times a year I used to go, right? So London was most certainly cleaner, and I love New York, right? But you have to call basically the way it is. And I mean, Mike, I think I'll agree with you with the Canadian Open was better. I actually didn't have a problem with the U.S. Open. I thought ESPN did a pretty good job. We'll get into it, but I didn't think it was as vast a disparity as you thought it was.
Yeah, so the other thing I just want to touch on baseball a second, because the signature series of the weekend was the Yankees and the Dodgers. And a little bit of the luster of it was taken off by the fact that Juan Soto was injured and didn't play. I've never seen it. I've never seen a team get more psyched up for a regular season series than the Dodgers seem to be against the Yankees. It's like, you know, they were celebrating like it was a playoff game, and, you know, fine. And then the Yankees won the you know, they didn't get swept. They had you know, they won on Sunday night ESPN. But I'll just say this about any team that wants to beat the Dodgers: you better have at least 2 left-handed pitchers in your rotation, because you've got Freeman and Ohtani. Now, you know, you've got some good righties with Betts and with Teoscar Hernandez, who killed the Yankees this weekend. And you better have a pretty decent bullpen. And the Yankees have an okay bullpen. It's sort of like patchwork. They always seem to do that. And they're, you know, some of their guys are coming back by the end of the year. But that Dodgers lineup is insane. So you better have a good bullpen, and you better have at least 2 lefties in your rotation. Anyway. All right.
So Mike, just on that, I mean, first of all, there was a ton of Dodger fans that came into New York to watch the game, and a ton of Dodger fans there, supposedly, who were walking the streets of Manhattan. So again, it's a demarcation type of series also, right? It's an evaluation point between the two of them. And in terms of them celebrating, Clay Holmes was pretty pumped after he struck out Betts to end the game yesterday. So I think it went both ways. And you heard the way Judge spoke after the series. I think the Yankees viewed it as kind of an evaluation point also. So I don't think they were siloed, the Dodgers, in terms of the way they treated it.
Since I was a kid, Dodger fans have always traveled to New York to see games, partially because of the Brooklyn connection, and partially because there's so many Dodger fans. So,
and there are a lot of second and third generation fans who probably stayed Dodger fans even after they moved from Brooklyn to LA. But no, Jan, I think the Holmes reaction to at the end of the game was a reaction to sort of a counter reaction to the way Hernandez and, you know, all these guys were like dancing, you know, like they were in the dugout, and Dave Roberts looked like he had been shot when Judge hit that 440-foot blast that he hit in the 8th inning. But anyway,
the thing was crushed.
Oh no, it's great! Believe me, I celebrated it. It was great. All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, go ahead.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, June 10th, 2024.
I'm Michael Agello, and I overstepped my bounds.
No.
I'm Jan Levine, and we're used to Mike overstepping his bounds.
You're all good. And that's Russ. And I'm Mac. And watch HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes every Monday, well, once in a while. And to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we do have to get to a couple things right off the bat.
Okay.
We got some rumors. The rumor chart just launched too, by the way. So we got some things about that. We'll get into that for sure.
Okay.
But I know, Mike, one of the things you were most upset about on the weekend, and I didn't want to talk to you about on the chat because I wanted to hold off on it right here. But the Stanley Cup being presented before the game.
An absolute friggin' travesty. And, I mean, I'm sorry. It's like, and I disagree with my good friend Jeff Merrick, who on the 32 Thoughts podcast thought it was fantastic. Elliot Friedman was more along my lines. Okay, the whole aura of the Stanley Cup over decades was you only saw the cup when it was on the line. Yeah. And it's not on the line yet because it's 0-0 going into game 1. So I'm sorry, because they whore themselves out to ESPN because they want to make a big splash, they bring out the cup. No.
Mike, I'd like to agree with you, but then both of us would be wrong. I'm not going to agree with you. No, honestly, I you know me, the one thing I'm totally 100% against a team, the first game of the next season, walking the Stanley Cup around the ice like they've done a couple times, you know, where they have.
That's fine.
I'm not okay with that. Why are you fine with that? I'm with you, but the Stanley Cup Finals, starting off with bringing the cup on the ice, I felt like made these players into kids again, and that's the one thing I've always noticed about the Stanley Cup. Like when you're there, you can't really necessarily see this maybe on TV as well as you can when you're there live. But I've been there for several Stanley Cups being presented, and yes, you have too. And you know, when the cup comes out onto the ice, the players become 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. Like the ones who just want it. They're like, they get like really fired up about it. It's a whole other level.
Here's what I'll say
about happened in this game, and I felt like because of that energy level that we saw what was to me a pace so fast that both teams couldn't play it in the first 5 minutes of that game.
Okay, here's what I would say, and this is the first year I'm not covering the cup in a while because it just was logistics were tough, especially with me at the combine. Yeah, but I'll say this. for all the years you and I have covered the Cup, we having to figure out where you're going to be, where the Cup's going to be, how the team's going to win, seeing the Cup for the first time, knowing that if a team has the chance to win the Cup, then the Stanley Cup's in the building, and if they don't have a chance to actually win it, that Stanley leaves, especially if a team loses a lead like we've seen it happen. To me, that's the tradition of it, so I don't like that they did that.
Right, okay. and I'll just say this, Zach. The team carrying around the Stanley Cup in the season opener of the following year, they're the champions. They earned that. So I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with, it's like, okay, you want to make a speech or something like that. You want to say, like have Michael Buffer come out and say, like do his usual like whatever. You don't bring out the cup. No. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jan.
So I'm going to take offense with my two traditionalists on the left part of the screen for me right now. And if you see the fan reaction, that tells you all you need to know, right? Yeah. So part of this is, remember, the goal is to grow the game. The goal is to get others engaged and involved. That's what having the cup there does. Now, what having the cup
there does is makes it the Super Bowl because you're showing it on game one. You might as well just have a one-game series.
No, because they're not going to show it every game. And if you think there's going to be any less reverence for the team that wins it, I think you're vastly mistaken there.
Right,
I don't think it's going to have an impact. I think another thing I think it conscrizes in terms of what they want to have, right? You get a visual of, hey, here's what you're playing for. Now, again, they didn't do it before, but this is a way to kind of say, guys, you know what? It's pretty clear what the goal at the end of the day is. Yeah. It's showing it to you right in your faces. This is what you're playing for. And again, it psychologically, but this gives you something tangible to tie it to.
There is nothing like that thing. And you're right, Russ, about the whole thing. It's so much fun. Is it in the building and stuff like that? I totally get that at the end of the series.
Yeah, and by the way,
let me finish this thought for a second.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Another thing I don't think you realize until you're there is how shiny the cup is. It's kind of weird. It is when you're live there with the cup, it hits, all the lights are hitting on it. It is very, very reverent. Like it is bigger than it looks. Like it's anywhere you are in the arena, you can see it. It's clearly the Stanley Cup. It looks like the Stanley Cup. Like we've all seen the Stanley. People, not everybody gets to see the Stanley Cup in person. It's there. It is reverent. There's something about that.
They actually clean it with Dawn dish liquid, which is crazy that's what they use. But that's
it is so bright and shiny. And the funny thing about
marketing campaign there, Russ. Dawn. The thing that
always struck me about the cup is how shiny it is when it comes out, how the players react like kids, and then when you're on the ice actually next to it, how antique it looks.
Dawn cleans oil slicks, ducks with oil all over it, and it cleans the Stanley Cup.
And it cleans fingerprints off the Stanley Cup. There you go.
Just think about this. Now the fans in Edmonton will never see the cup.
Oh, right. I mean, to me, I was like Jan. I was like, there was a list.
That's a Mike line. You just stole Mike's line. Give it back to him.
Said, but also, I really liked Jan, and it kind of got me thinking of this. It felt like a little bit of a reward for the two teams winning their conferences. Like they've gotten, like if you've ever been to if you coached in like a kids tournament at any sport, and there'll be a table that you walk past with and the trophy is there that the kids can win. And I would always tell my team, go look at that table for a second. Look at that table. And there's something about it. Bringing this out. It was like it brought it back to that. This is like a kids tournament. It was really. I loved everything about it. I wouldn't think I would have. If you had asked me they should do it, Mike, I would have said no. But when I actually saw it in person, and that brings me to the game because the game.
Well, your first instinct was right, and by the way, my line was that was the closest Edmonton was going to get to the cup. But
they're a pretty good team, Mike. And also watching this game, you got to see how good Edmonton was because Florida is a really good team, and Edmonton gave them everything it could handle in this game.
Honestly, I think Edmonton shot their bolt. I think because they got Bobrovsky was superhuman. Okay, he had a phenomenal game. He made a bunch of great saves early on. The early goal, I think, was, it didn't seem to affect Edmonton in terms of them having the advantage in territorial play. And I think they had it in the first two periods and they found themselves down 2-0. And then the empty net goal. Here's the problem. Florida will not play that bad again. Edmonton played maybe their best game of the series, possibly, and Florida, they're not. That was the worst I've seen Florida play in the playoffs all year. The worst.
Well, I mean, listen, it was a lot of that had to do with Edmonton. I mean, honestly, the reality was that Edmonton is crazy fast. Like, they're way faster than anybody that Florida's played up till now. And you're sitting back and you're watching them play this game, and they like, I really did get that sense. I was with my kids watching it, and I really got the sense in the beginning of the game that they were playing at a speed of which they were both trying to play each other. They were both trying to outspeed each other to the point where they really weren't able to connect on passes. There was a whole thing happening where they were just going fast. Like, it wasn't even hockey. It was just fast.
I mean, McDavid, that one play where he sort of wound up and went back into his zone and was, I mean, it looked like, it looked like the Fast and Furious, and he hit the nitrous oxide.
Crazy.
But honestly, and this is what I thought when Russ and I were watching the game, watched the first 2 periods before the restaurant kicked us out.
By the way, they kicked us out at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night
with the Stanley Cup game on.
Yeah. McDavid was not in 5th gear after he got rocked by Sam Bennett. And Sam Bennett had 11 hits in that game. He had more. I think he had more hits than the Edmonton team did. And I'm telling you right now, they took a couple dumb penalties, but the difference in the series, I know that you picked them in 6 games, I picked them in 6 games, is that Florida will rock their world. And it doesn't mean just, it means McDavid and Draisaitl as well. Now, if they don't call those penalties, Edmonton is toast because they need those power plays. And I think, what is it? Florida has killed 35 of the last 37 PKs. I mean, it's...
No, I mean, I've never seen, and the difference in the game was there were a lot of, obviously Bobrovsky, the goaltending was a big difference, right, both ways.
Right.
And that's to be expected to a degree. I mean, Bob, the couple moments, like when McDavid swooped around and came in front of the net, made that great play where he beat, I think it was Ekman Larsson on the outside, came around, and Bob does a little poke check, and it was just best on best. You could just see, like, this is the best goalie, the best player at the same time. It was really fun to watch. Just seeing that energy, you could say that this is incredible. The difference, I think, will be that I don't know that Edmonton can hold that pace for the series as well as Florida can. Like, I think Florida just, the depth in Florida is just the third line. You look at the third line in Florida, you can see the first 2 lines washing out each other to a degree, but the third line in Florida was way better than the third line on Edmonton.
Yeah,
and Edmonton's 4th line can't match it either. That's a problem. I will say this, though. We all talked about it, but when McDavid got bloodied, there really wasn't a response.
No.
It wasn't at all.
And I know he's not playing tonight, and that shows that Chris Knobloch actually has vision. But the pairing of Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci killed the Oilers. Cody Ceci is one of the worst defensemen.
It's not all on Ceci though, man. I like watching.
If you watch
the issue, Mike, I know you hate.
Let me finish my point, and then you respond.
Go ahead.
On that goal, on the opening goal, on the Verhaeghe goal.
Yeah.
Ceci is the right side defenseman, and he goes and takes himself out of position and leaves Verhaeghe wide open.
So does Nurse. If you
don't do that.
Nurse did the same thing. Like there's a 3-on-2, and they talked about it in between periods, I think, even where Nurse shifts. Nurse didn't play between those two. He goes over to the guy who has the puck that leaves the other guy open. They created two 2-on-1s basically, which is what you don't want to do. And I think that I'm not a huge Ceci fan, but I'm just going to sit there and say that he's the wrong defenseman to play with Darnell Nurse. I mean, the reality is that combination makes no sense whatsoever.
But they don't have many options. That's the
the thing is that it's not really on Ceci that he's playing with Darnell Nurse. Like, this is what he's to do with.
But he's a veteran defenseman, and when you're a veteran defenseman and you have limited mobility, which Ceci does, what you have to do is basically do no harm. And what he did was, on that play, he took himself completely out of position, left the center of the ice wide open. Zach Hyman, who had, I think, been out on the ice for over a minute, was trailing Verhaeghe, couldn't catch up, and he gave him a wide open path to the net. And on the second goal, which was almost as bad, look at Evander Kane, who completely was completely lazy and let Evan Rodriguez go to the slot.
So was McDavid on that goal, though?
No, watch the replay.
I watched it.
He's a Vander Kane's man, and Evander Kane feigned trying to check him as the puck is going into the net. It's like that old goal that I saw at the Odd years ago where Donnie Edwards, after Lanny McDonald blew it by him, the puck hit the twine and he goes this. It's like,
Listen, I saw that, but I also think McDavid's the one who gave up the puck, first of all, on the rush. He gave it up, and he was rushing, and he gave up. He tried to go through too many guys, which McDavid was doing quite a bit of. You can see McDavid trying to create that one play where he goes through 6 guys. Florida wasn't biting on it, but on that play particularly, he does it. And then McDavid is not fast enough to get back because McDavid could have easily picked off Rodriguez as well. He was chasing him, and if you watch the highlight, it's McDavid that's actually skating towards Rodriguez. He's closest. Maybe that's not his man, Mike, but he was there, and he's skating at half speed. To me, that's like, you see it. That was him.
Something I brought up before the series began. I was like, and I brought it up when I was watching with Mike. I said, if Florida takes the lead here and goes up 2-0, they're going to damage Edmonton mentally and probably damage the team wondering about Skinner a little bit. Now, Skinner didn't have a bad game, but he didn't have a great game either.
Yeah.
And so you do kind of wonder now with Florida doing this and Bob pitching a shutout.
Yeah.
It's not a great start. And this next game now, really just changing one defenseman is not necessarily going to do it because it was the whole thing. It was the whole team. The whole team just kind of wilted after 2 periods. They really did.
Yeah, and they seemed to
play Florida, Russ. So I don't think that. I mean, they were a better team in that game for the most part.
Well, they seem to think because Desharnais is a bigger defenseman that's gonna scare off. I mean, I'm sorry, Florida are a bunch of psychos. They're going to run through a wall. Bennett and Lomberg, if he plays, and he didn't play in game 1, and Cousins if he plays. I mean, they're sitting some of the guys who I think are just like they're like in the startup blocks waiting to run somebody through.
As is Okposo, Mike. Like watching Okposo, he's doing the same thing. Like he is. You can tell he is like realizing this is a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. He's playing like it. Edmonton's not willing to stop anybody going to the net. That's the crazy part.
Yeah,
they have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, they are, and eventually Florida will wear them down, I think. But I do think Edmonton comes out of that game 1 feeling pretty good about themselves. To be honest, I'm really kind of surprised. I mean, they really should. Bob's not going to play like that every game. I mean, you're not going to.
Yeah, but the team in front of him didn't play that well, Eck. I mean, defensively, they're extremely sound, and that was not a good defensive
going against a really good offensive team, Mike. I mean, it's like this. The other thing is like they didn't play as well defensively, maybe, but this is also the best offensive team they've ever played against, and it's.
Oh no, it's not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, they're a 2-man team.
But those two lines are better than any other top 2 lines that they played against. And the reality is that.
Well, no, I'll dispute that, but I'll dispute that in the sense. Well, I mean that in terms of the teams that they played, I think the Rangers' top 2 lines are better than Edmonton's top 2 lines. They just didn't play that way.
I mean, I think they're good, but I don't think they're better than Edmonton's top 2 lines. Do you, Russ?
Say that again.
You think the Rangers'
top 2 lines? Do you think the Rangers' top 2 lines playing at their usual level are better than Edmonton's top 2? I do.
Nah, I think they're just behind it. I do. They have slight issues too. I think they're behind them.
And I can't think of another team that has a better top 6. I mean, honestly,
I can't either.
I mean, you can definitely argue that their bottom 6 are worse, or the worst bottom 6 they played against, Mike. You can definitely argue that. Yes. But to argue their top 6 is their top 6, and they play so much. That's why I do think that over time the series shifts to Florida and that's why I do think Edmonton blew it, because if Edmonton wins that game, they have a chance to end the series quicker. But if they let the series go to 6 or 7 games, they're going to not be able to do it.
Yeah, they had to win that game. I believe that.
McDavid played, and Draisaitl played, I think, over 25 minutes.
Yeah, and you can't do that all the time.
Yeah, and that Florida, and I'm not saying this in a predatory way, but Florida will target McDavid and Draisaitl. They will hit them every chance that they get.
Yeah. And if one more key thing that I remember we were watching, Mike, Bob really derailed the Edmonton power play. Like he made some of the great saves on that. Yeah. And by doing that in game 1, it is going to affect Edmonton mentally in the next game.
It is. And no question, Edmonton was the difference between these two teams. You could see clearly was Edmonton, even though they outshot Florida by quite a bit, they're trying to aim their shots where Florida's just throwing things at the net, and that's what Florida does all the time, and that's why Florida, will win that game.
Florida knows they'll have 3 guys in the crease. That's why.
Right.
But Florida scored on their 2 best chances.
No, they did, and they scored on breaks too, like in a way. Like the first one was a rush. Florida does score on some rushes. They do score on rushes, but they're really at their best when they're forechecking. They're an incredible forechecking team. Their defense, the Panthers' defense, knows how to pinch better than almost any defense in the league. Like the Panthers' defense pinches incredibly well.
Can I just ask one thing, because I'm open-minded to this comparison. Gretzky was on the Sportsnet broadcast, and he made the comparison, and he went head-to-head against this guy a bunch of times, so who better than him to compare him to? But I don't see the comparable of Alexander Barkov to Brian Trottier.
No, I do. I
don't.
Stylistically, Trottier wasn't a aggressive player, but he was definitely more than physical. I mean, Russ and I watched enough Ranger games to know how physical he was, and I watched him against
same here, obviously,
both in 83 and 84. Look, I said my view of him is Barkov is a more physical version of Patrice Bergeron. Is kind of how I viewed him. But again, if you're going to go, but if you're going to go back historically, I mean, actually, Trottier wasn't that big though, Russ.
No, he was
Barkov is definitely bigger than Trottier.
But he played the defense. That's the part he was talking about. That's
no. I mean, two-way wise, Jan. Two-way wise, I think Barkov is up there with Bergeron, but he's big. And that's the thing. Trottier was not big. I mean, Trottier was fantastic.
There was nobody big like Barkov playing center in the NHL in that era.
Yeah. Right. Trottier was just impossible to take off his skates. So he was tough as committee. So, I mean, he wasn't big, but he was solid. He was
he was a fire hydrant. But I'm just saying, that's the thing. Barkov's got the advantage of being as defensively sound as Bergeron. And that's saying a lot because Bergeron's an all-time great. And he's offensively gifted, and he's big. So like he can match up against a Matthews. He can match up now speed-wise. McDavid's got the advantage on him, but positionally, Barkov is phenomenal. So if you go with that matchup, I think Barkov is going to snuff out McDavid over a 5 or 6 game series.
I mean, Edmonton wasn't without chances, right? The big thing they talked a lot about, right, is Florida limited their time and space when they got a chance, which is why they weren't able to elevate the puck. As we've seen with Bobrovsky, you need to get the puck off the ice. He's great with low shots. He robbed Nugent Hopkins on a low shot. He robbed a bunch of guys on low shots, especially with just flashing the pad. Then beyond the double stack save, where he stacked the pads when he went across the goal crease. But if you're going to beat him, you're going to have to beat him up high. But you need enough time to be able to lift the puck, and that's what Florida did. Anytime they got beaten, they caught up and didn't allow the Oilers enough time to try to lift the puck high enough to get it over Barkov's pads.
It's a really good point, Jan, because like one of the things about that you're right that Bob will go down on every shot, right? So he will go down, and we've seen it throughout Bob's career that teams know that if they can wait him out, they can go high. But if you don't give a team a chance to wait them out, if they have to get the shots off fast, they don't have that ability. So
Tony in the chat was saying the comparable is Kopitar. The thing is, I think Barkov is better offensively than Kopitar. The size is right, the defensive ability is right, but I think Barkov's a better scorer than Kopitar is.
Kopitar is a little more like Trottier.
I would put them dead even.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Kopitar in his prime.
Kopitar in his prime was winning cups.
Yeah, I would compare Kopitar more to Trottier, though. If you're going to go flat out, I would say Kopitar and Trottier are really closer than Barkov and Trottier are. But I think as far as just in games go, but as far as defensive abilities go, I think Barkov's right there.
Now, before we get to the rumors, Zach, and I know you want to concentrate on that. I just wanted somebody had a question in the chat, and since we got Jan and
please.
Frank was like, question for the panel: do you think if given a mulligan, Drew would go back and trade for Gensel, seeing how little scoring and how close the games were, and how useless Roslovic wasn't useless in the first round, but after that he was pretty much so. But Jan, you first.
I think it kind of depends on what the cost is, right? If it was the rumored, if they wanted Offman, my guesstimate is that probably not. He wouldn't make that trade. If it's the one and other pieces, then a better shot at making that trade. But I think if Offman had to be included in there, which is, look, Carolina had a much deeper system, which is why they were able to tap on a bunch of those guys to make that trade. And we also know that Dubas loves bunting, which also swayed him a little bit in terms of taking that package. Yeah. But I think it depends on what other components had to be included. If it was Offman or Perot, I still think he hangs up the phone. Anybody else, including the one, he probably would make the trade.
Russ?
Yeah, what Jan said is right. I don't think they were going to trade either one of them. Having bunting was a big edge. I tried to tell people Roslovic's not good, but whatever.
Yeah, I think if they had a mulligan to go back and do it again, I think he'd go back to Anaheim and give up the one in Kakko to go get Henrique and get Vetrano, who was better.
I don't think they would have done that either.
Everybody seems to forget Vetrano kind of vanished after the first half of the second round and did nothing the next round and a half.
Honestly, they're not going to. They wouldn't have done that because they're not going to trade Kakko. They're going to wait him out and make sure he really isn't what they think he can be before they trade him. They're not trading him in the offseason either.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of rumors out there about them trading Kakko.
I know, but Drury is acting like he wants to keep him, and I think Drury deserves credit for keeping Lafreniere. Yeah. I interviewed a young player from the Q, Maxime Messé, at the Combine, and he models his game after Lafreniere. So I had a discussion with him, and I put it up on NHLDraftBuzz.com because it was interesting because I said to him, but you know that it took a while for Lafreniere to get this way. What do you think about that, for yourself? And he said, no, it helped him kind of learn that, you can't just walk into the NHL and do really well from any league. It's really hard. So that lesson that Lafreniere was learning is teaching others now. And I think the Rangers, they're just going to roll the dice on Kakko same way.
Okay. I'm sure Markstrom is one of the guys in the rumor.
He is on the rumor chart. We can start with him if you like. Okay. We got I launched 26 players today on the rumor chart.
It's a lot.
Although, to be fair, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's about 8 of those guys I don't have a team for yet, so I'm really more at like 18 right now. But I'm working on finishing the rest up right after this podcast. But Markstrom is definitely on there. Markstrom I have very likely being moved. I only have Calgary, 10% chance of Calgary keeping him.
I think that's 0% act because they have Ladar and they have Wolf and they're he doesn't have waivers any longer, I don't believe. So that I think they want to make that move. It's just a question of maximizing what they can get back.
3 teams I've heard that are really interested. Obviously, we all know about New Jersey. That's been out there forever, and probably they are the favorite. I have them as the favorite in my rumor chart, but I think 60% right now. But Ottawa at 20%, which has been also talked about recently. I think Gary put that out there, and Colorado at 10% is the other name I heard. So it's kind of a surprising in Colorado, but that's I do think Avalanche could see that as an interesting move for Colorado if they did it. It would be a really weird move, but for some reason there is somebody there who likes them, I was told, and that there is a sort of a plan in place that they could possibly pull it off. So I don't know.
Yeah, Elliot Friedman reported on Ottawa. He said that was a possibility, although he wasn't sure whether Markstrom would waive to go to Ottawa. The other place he mentioned was Toronto because of the connection between Treliving, who signed Markstrom when he was in Calgary, signed him away from Vancouver. That would make some sense, but I think it would take more than their first-round pick at 23 to get him, and then the Leafs would be to basically doubling the salary that they paid Samsonov for 2 more years of Markstrom, who's 34 years old, and they do have a young goalie in Wall, so it would make sense to bring in a veteran. But do you want to spend over $7 million on your goaltending?
Yeah, he's an expensive backup.
Well, no, he'd be their starter. He'd be their starter.
I would say this: if I'm Steve Stamkos, I've got to really put the full court press to get Markstrom because A, I've got to show my fan base, but B, I've got to show the new ownership that, hey, if we get this team could actually compete. Like, this is one of the things that's preventing the Ottawa Senators from actually competing. Yeah. So if I'm the Ottawa Senators, who have a lot of assets and draft picks and such, they've got to try everything they can to get him.
But here's the issue with Ottawa right now, and they're lucky that they have some players on entry level contracts that they can counterbalance things. They would be spending $11 million on goaltending with Korpisalo and with Markstrom. Now,
yeah, how much more is Korpisalo have on his deal?
I think it's 3 more years.
Yeah,
they just signed him last year.
Okay. What's Markstrom have left though?
2 more years.
Yeah, that's fine. They can live with that, I think.
Well, okay, Korpisalo is $4 million. He's got 4 more years at $4 million.
It's only 4. At 4, that's fine. And then you're talking about Markstrom for 2 years. I think they could live with that. That's a team that desperately needs to make a playoff run. Even if they don't make it, they've got to be right in the thick of it.
Well, I mean, I think just like Toronto, I think their problems are greater than just the goaltending. Their problem is that they can't play defense. They can't.
Well, I mean, if you have better goaltending, it will help that part. And I do think they need another good veteran, all-around player in the top 9. I think if they did that.
So if you're going to go that route, Russ and Mike, if Ottawa does get Markstrom, do they try to flip Korpisalo back to LA where he played really well in front of that defense?
Yeah, they could.
Because LA needs a goalie because Talbot basically was great early and then kind of faded as the year went on.
I mean,
that's a possibility. You're right.
The most interesting thing that we'll track on the rumor chart is the musical chairs of the goaltenders, because Ullmark, Markstrom, Saros, Korpisalo, like you just said, Merzlikins, all these goalies are in play.
Yeah, they are.
And I think there are more teams needing a tandem or a number 1 than there are tandem goalies or number 1s out there.
Yeah, and it's going to make the price come down a little bit having those.
Oh, I think it's going to go up. I think it's
no, because you have that many goalies, it kind of works the opposite way, right? So
teams can go in another direction. I think
they don't have to. If Markstrom's the only big goalie out there, then Calgary can get what they want for him, basically. But that's not the only big goalie out there. So
right, but okay, I think they're, and I just did an unscientific listing of how many teams I think need tandem or number 1 goalies. It was 7, and there's probably more. Right. And I would say there's maybe 4 or 5 guys who are legitimate tandem or number 1 goalies. And then you get into the guys like Merzlikins, who I think there are question marks on. Or if Pittsburgh decides they're going to trade for John Gibson, if they try to trade Tristan Jarry, these. I mean, I don't know if there are 7 tandem or number 1 goalies on the market, and that's, I think, going to drive the price up.
Right. No, that really could. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I think that I don't think it drives the price up. I think Ullmark is really a guy that people consider right up there with Markstrom. I think
but he's got 1 year left, and that might be attractive to some teams. That he's got
to some teams. Saros is similar. That way,
I think Saros is getting signed. I don't think he's going to be on the market.
I think at the end of the day he gets signed, but I've heard there's a lot of talk he's going to get moved out of Nashville, more than I've ever heard. So I still think at the end of the day he gets signed, but I would put it at 50-50. But I've never really thought that it was close to 50.
Here's the thing that's laughable, and I'm not as anti-Saros as Russ is, and I'm not saying Russ is down on him, but Russ.
I'm not saying he stinks. I just don't love him in the big game. That's all.
But the hilarious thing is that he's got a year left in his contract, and Shesterkin has got a year left in his contract, and a lot of the chatter out there is, well, Saros may wait until Shesterkin signs his deal. That's nice because one guy is on Mars and the other one is on Venus. You see Saros, as good of a goaltender he is nowhere close to being as good a goalie as Igor Shesterkin is, and Shesterkin is probably going to get 10 to 11 to 11.5 or something like that, and Saros isn't getting close to that.
No, that's why I think Nashville will sign him to a sweetheart deal immediately. That's the exact reason, because he has no say in the market.
If he's willing to.
But I also heard Nashville Ullmark. I can see Nashville and Ullmark. I really could. I've heard that too. So
what about Askarov?
Tony? I mean, Askarov's coming for sure, but
but there's no rush to do anything with him. They don't have to rush to put him in because they have another year for Saros. They don't have to rush to trade him because he's under team control.
Unless he's pissing and moaning, Russ. He's played 2 years.
Matter.
It doesn't matter. You've got to matter.
Russ. Doesn't matter.
Barry, you get 1 more year out of Saros, or you can get 1 more year out of Ullmark. It's basically the same thing. You really have. I mean, not the same thing, but they're both 1 year contracts, right?
Right.
With a year left.
But Swayman is already an established goalie, and Askarov is a prospect. So there's the difference there.
You forget this is the organization who had a player on an entry-level contract named Alexander Radulov who went back to the KHL.
Right. Well, they'll tell Askarov to do the same thing. That's what they'll do.
Right, and he'll do it, and then they're screwed.
Look, they managed this situation with Rene and Saros fairly well. They can do the same thing with Saros and Askarov. They have experience in terms of how to manage it.
But, Jan, it's a little different because Rene was at the end. And
you think everybody's bolting back to the KHL. Nobody's bolting back there.
So,
nobody.
And Saros is nowhere close. He's in the prime of his career. I think he's 30. So I mean, I think Rene was 36 or 37 when Saros.
No, but I'm saying in terms of managing playing time, Mike, in terms of how they divvied up the playing time and how they managed the transition, they did a pretty good job of managing it. So probably look. I don't think they're signing him to a 5 or 6 year deal. I can see a 3-year deal they want to give him, and he may decide to go elsewhere.
Yeah, Askarov's playing, and he's playing in the playoffs. I don't think he's unhappy at all.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Okay, well,
other players on the chart that are kind of interesting. Yep. I mean, we do have to talk about Mitch Marner, who I put on the rumor chart.
Okay.
I really, I find it so hard to believe they would trade him. I really think, but at the same time, there are so many people who think they're going to trade him that it's.
I don't find it hard at all.
I know
that they're willing to trade him, but I find it hard to believe he wants to be traded. That's the problem is he's got the no move clause, and he may stick it to them. And right now it sounds like because Darren Ferris has come out, his agent has come out and says, "Oh, we're content with playing out the contract and then going free agent," and that's the worst case scenario here for Toronto. Then they're stuck because they can't trade him. They can't clear his salary. They can't get anything for him. They have $11 million that they'd like to spend on other players, either in free agency or in the trade market. They can't do it. And they go through another year of a core group that cannot win, that has not won. And then, and then he walks away. And, now he costs himself probably between $10 and $12 million by doing this. That's the reason why in the end his agent may relent and they talk turkey and he goes someplace where he wants to go and that team signs him to an 8-year contract. But he's not getting an 8-year contract from the Leafs. It's not going to be William Nylander 2.0.
I think what X said, and I this is not going to be something happy for you, Mike, but I think the Leafs already know Marner's staying, and they're just going to live with it. I think that's what's happening.
I've heard things different. I've heard things from people from sources.
You're always going to hear things.
Always going to hear things, but it's up to Mitch Marner. And like you said, he doesn't want to leave. So the reality is, he's going to. There's no benefit for him to waive a no trade clause. None.
Well, okay, there is because this is going to get very ugly. Does it? Okay, you shrug your shoulders.
What can you do? How are they going to get?
No. I'm not saying. Okay, listen to me. I'm not talking about the Leafs.
Yeah,
the Leafs are a classy organization. They will not throw them to the wolves.
Yeah, they won't.
But the fan base will, and that is the problem. Does a player from Toronto who lives in Toronto, whose family is in Toronto, want to deal with a year of the fan base basically booing him or getting pissed off at him like they got pissed off at Matt Sundin at the end of his career? I don't know about that. If I'll tell you one thing, he is not going to sway the organization. This is not a year ago where they fired Kyle Dubas and they did not trade William Nylander because Treliving just came on board.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to be able to get full value for him. And then he had the great beginning of the year and they signed him to a contract. No matter what Mitch Marner does, the Leafs are not signing him to an extension. If he realizes he
never true, Mike. You can never say that. I mean,
I can say it right now. I can say it right now, Ak.
You can't say that. How can you possibly, no matter what he does, Mike? I mean, if he wins the scoring title next year, there's no way they sign him to an extension.
No, I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't believe so.
They'll find a way.
I think there's always a slight chance, and like I said, I don't think Marner's going to care what the fans think. I think Marner wants to stay there. Those are his friends on the team.
Yeah.
He's going to stay there, and unless they're not going to make the playoffs, then maybe he would change his mind and go to a playoff team.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't think anything's going to change his mind.
I think you dramatically underestimate how ugly it will get.
These players know that, and I think that the fans know it at the end of the day too. Like Toronto fans are smart fans; they know. Like, I mean, we've seen it get ugly with Matt Sundin, and we've seen it get ugly.
Right, and there's a reason why last year at the Global Series was the first time you saw Matt Sundin's face at anything related to the Maple Leafs.
But it didn't get ugly with Matthews last year.
No,
it could have.
Because him and Nylander have both communicated that they were willing. Matthews on the second contract took less to stay.
Right.
Nylander took less to stay. Mitch Marner alienated himself from the Toronto fan base 6 years ago when he demanded to be paid almost as much as Austin Matthews. He did not earn himself, and then the way he has played in the playoffs over the last few years, he has very little credibility right now with the Toronto fan base. And if it's found out on July 1st that he exercised his no move clause, and it comes out like it did with Sundin, where they had a deal with Montreal and they could have acquired either PK Subban or Max Pacioretty or Ryan McDonough in one of those deals, and it didn't happen, his name is mud. He will not want to go through
very different scenarios though, Mike, because Matt Sundin was at the end of his career. Marner's still very much in the prime of his career.
Right, but no matter what he does, if the Leafs communicate to him that this is your last year in Toronto and we are not re-signing you.
So if he's having a 90-point season and the Leafs are going to make the playoffs, the fans are going to be mad at him? No, I don't.
The fans are going to be mad at the Leafs. That's what's good. That's the reality, Mike. I mean, fans are going to be mad at the Leafs. They're going to be like, they're going to say we got to keep him somehow. Trade whoever. Trade.
If they make the playoffs and lose in the first round, they will be mad at Marner even more.
It depends what happens.
The season will be over. Like who cares?
It doesn't. I mean, reality is doesn't.
He's got to live there at Russ.
No, but he's
living there.
Listen, pause for a second. Of all the scenarios that could happen, right? We have the scenario of like, okay, he plays out the season and just goes to free agency and everybody's pissed off. There's that one scenario, right? That happens. But then the other two scenarios you're saying, whether he accepts a trade or he takes less money to stay in Toronto, of those two possibilities, I would say it's a stronger possibility he takes less money to stay in Toronto than there is.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
He likes it playing here, and if he likes playing there as much as he does, then he's going to go against his own word that way. He will have less money, like you said. There's no way he can sit back and justify it.
He will have to make at least $1 more than William Nylander, or probably even as close to Matthews as he can get, which they can't afford to do.
But if he makes $1 more than Nylander, he'll be the least paid top 10 scorer in the league, right? I mean, he will be, right? Because I mean, the reality is
he'll be the second highest paid winger in the NHL,
And but the least paid top 10 player in the league. Because I mean, his scoring wise. I mean, listen, the teams are interested in him. Of course, everybody's interested in him. But when you talk about and I went around looking at things, Colorado came up again, which is how they do that. I don't know. Again, that's not my job to find out how they're going to do it. My job is just who's talking to them.
Trading Rantanen, and that's how they do it.
Yeah, that's how they do it, right?
I'm joking.
Chicago, the Blackhawks have a big interest in Mitch Marner. That
would be Seth Jones. That would be a
ton of sense, right? And the Philadelphia Flyers have a lot of interest in Mitch Marner, and they always have. Like for whatever reason, the Flyers have always had an interest in Mitch Marner.
Okay, Russ, let's construct a Mitch Marner trade.
They don't have the assets.
I don't have the assets either, but they have.
Just to trade Mitchkov, they don't have the assets.
Right. Mitchkov would have to be. It'd have to be a first-round pick. It'd have to be Konechny. It'd have to be other things. I
would say Travis Konechny and Mitchkov, and I don't think that makes any sense for Philadelphia.
Konechny and 2 first-round draft picks. 2 first-round draft picks and Konechny for Marner.
Fine. I mean, you could do that, but then you have to sign Marner, and then you're still not really a playoff team for another 2 years.
I agree.
And Marner going to wait 3 years to make the playoffs again.
Right. That's the thing. Right now, there's no scenario whatsoever that Mitch Marner will take less. No way.
Okay. Because when you say this, no way at all.
No way at all.
Got it.
Save this. We saved all of them. Save this one. He is not going to take less to stay in Toronto. No. Even though Tavares' contract ends at the end of the year,
Right.
Tavares will take less. Tavares
Right.
will take considerably less, but Mitch Marner, no.
Why do you think Mitch Marner, like when Crosby took less and all these other people take less, why do you think Marner's
Because he didn't take less the last time, Mac.
Okay, that was last time. Now he's with the team that's winning. He wants to keep that team together. These are his friends. Very different scenario. Very different scenario.
Okay, we'll see.
So that's, I think at the end of the day, that's a player that I would doubt would go someplace.
I'll just say that you may very well be right that they because they have no control over the situation that they bring back the core five. Well, then we know what's going to happen next year. They'll lose in the first round again next year because they can't address the other areas of need, and it's their own fault because they gave them no move clauses. But they won't be able to address the areas of need that they've needed to address for years. And then $22 million come off the cap at the end of next year, and then they can go and do it then. But it's completely asinine. And if I was Mitch Marner, I would not want to stay in Toronto because he is not wanted anymore.
How can he not be wanted anymore?
Heck, they can't win.
I think
they cannot win.
I think
you're putting it all on him.
Not wanted part.
No, it's not. Heck, it's not all on him.
Well, how could one of the top teams for the NHL not be wanted anymore?
Heck, what did I just say? They can't make okay.
Is it on him if they can't win?
I just wrote about this today. Bill Simmons, who does podcasts, his own podcast network, The Ringer. He's a former ESPN guy. He's a big Boston Celtic fan, and he recognized the Celtics right now, who are up 2-0 on Dallas, and said, "Well, the reason that they're probably going to win the NBA championship is because they went out and they had, and we know the salary caps are different in the NBA and the NHL, but they went out and added players like Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, who provide them with enough depth that if their star players don't perform well, they can win, and they can still win. The Maple Leafs cannot do that. Teams like the Rangers, teams like Florida, and even teams like Edmonton, because they got Draisaitl on one of the most ridiculous contracts in the NHL, can afford to add players and have a second level of talent. Toronto is paying $46 million to 4 forwards.
But they're not going to be paid that next year. Tavares is going to be making
less. What's that?
Tavares is going to make less.
No, this upcoming season.
Sure.
This upcoming season, it's $46 million. So they cannot go out and sign the 2 defensemen that they need or get the #1 goaltender that they need. They cannot do it because they cannot afford it. So
they knew that before, but that's nothing new. Like that was the case before Treliving took the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, Russ. And the thing is, he's got to find a way out of it. Otherwise, it's another losing season.
Like I know you say that,
Russ,
but
sometimes the way out of it is through it. Sometimes you have to go.
Right. Sometimes you have to wait for it to play out.
Yeah, you do. You have to hope some of the players you drafted that aren't like first, second, third round draft picks do something. You have to hope that on something that you pick up some guy for like a Verhaeghe or whatever for cheap somewhere.
And you burn another prime year of Matthews and Nylander.
I mean, that's Mike. That's what are they, the first team to ever do this? Come on,
Russ.
Yeah, no, it's
not. But what I'm saying is they have to change this situation because it is a losing situation. They will continue to lose with this.
They'll tell you they did change the situation last year. And they did what they could, and
they actually did.
Right, but it wasn't enough because they didn't. It was not enough because they're weighed down by those 4 players.
Right, so they have to make Marner's contract to play off of the cap.
No, they need to trade Marner. They need to trade him. They need to get him to waive his no move clause, and there'll be a benefit to him because he'd be able to get an 8-year deal someplace else. But they need to not pressure him, but they need it's beneficial to him and to the Leafs.
Right. How many big stars in the league may do that for their teams? It's a short list, Mike.
I'm not saying to do it for their team. Do it for himself. He's not going to get.
He wants to play there. Going somewhere else isn't doing it for himself.
Oh, okay. I mean, the Leafs
think the way you think, Mike. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
The Leafs won't do this, but I mean, if it got to the point where they just said, you know what, Mitch, sit at home. We don't want you to play.
They can't.
That won't happen. That won't happen because. But I'm saying
they can indicate to him that they're not going to sign him to the long-term deal he wants.
Right.
The only way he's going to get it is by accepting a trade elsewhere. But they have to manage that situation properly, also without alienating the fan base as well.
And Jan, if that's the way it plays out, then it's a win-win because then he allows the Leafs to trade him. He goes to a place that he wants, and he gets the 8 years. He's not.
But I want you to understand something. Mitch Marner is not going to come into training camp for the Leafs and think that the Leafs can't win and then think he's the reason. He doesn't think that way.
Exactly. There's no way.
Of course, he doesn't think that, Russ, but that's the reality.
Well, but that's not his reality.
I don't find nobody cares about his reality. He thinks that they can win the Stanley Cup.
He should care about it because he has all the control.
Right.
Right.
But at the end of the day, his reality is the reality.
In the end of the day, the reality is if he sticks with his guns in terms of staying in Toronto this year, no matter what, he costs himself $10 to $12 million. If he wants to do that, fine.
I don't think it's costing him anything.
He's going to be hated in his own hometown for probably the rest of his life. So
no, if they win, Mike,
I want to
they
ask this.
won't win. Eck. How many more examples do you need?
The cap is going up. Tell me how he's going to lose 10 or 12 million.
How many more examples
How
do
is
you
he going
need?
to lose 10 or 12 million, Mike?
What's that?
The cap is going up. How is he going to lose money?
Because Russ, he can only sign a 7-year deal in free agency,
right?
And that would probably be the amount that he's going to get on a new contract is between $10 to $12 million. He's not going to get an 8-year deal unless he's traded before the deadline. And if he says I'm not waiving my no move clause, then the most he can get is a 7-year deal. He can get an 8-year deal if he signs.
I understand the extra year, but he'll still have another contract after this. He's not losing anything.
And he's still going to be
35 years old. He's 27.
And you don't think at 35, Mitch Marner is anything like Sidney Crosby and will still play a couple of years?
I do not.
Okay. All right.
Well, there's no reason to think he wouldn't, but yeah, okay. I mean, it's fine.
If he signs an 8-year deal this year, that will be his last contract.
All right, so he gives up $12 million and he still gets $100 million. Like, what are 150? I mean, at the end of the day, like if you're going to say that, like that, the reality is like, it's just not doesn't make any sense.
We all know that in professional sports, it's a measuring contest. So that money matters.
Well, but here's the thing. Okay, Mike. But here's the thing to actually against your argument. If he goes to a no tax state and signs 7 years, it's better than signing 8 in Toronto for whatever number he was going to sign anyhow 2 years ago.
Right, Russ, but the problem is the no-tax state will want to pay him less. Like Florida.
Doesn't mean they will, though.
Okay. I don't think
best free agent out on the market next year.
Yes, but Russ, Dallas or Tampa or Florida or Nashville are not paying him $12 million.
I think Utah's not.
They won't.
Why not?
Because they won't. They don't pay top dollar on anybody.
Hold on.
Florida's at the cap.
Isn't Utah the same tax structure?
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe they're a no tax state.
So you don't think Utah would overpay for Mitch Marner to get their first big star player to go with Clayton Keller? I do.
Okay, maybe that's let's see. But I'm telling you right now. I mean, Florida, they're at the cap, but they're paying more players. They're not.
No, they are. They're not going super contracts. I agree.
No, that's not his style. His style is not to do that. But I'm just saying that you can't just say that these teams won't do it. Like it's just impossible to say that.
I think Utah will do it.
We'll wait 12 months, so we'll see.
Utah's a good chance Utah could do it. Chicago would do it. Why wouldn't Chicago do it? Like I mean, like
because they have a guy named Connor Bedard that they have to pay in 2 years. That's why.
But that's only one guy.
If the cap keeps rising, it's not going to be a problem.
Right. It's
not going to go up another $5 million next year, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, you only have one player. You're talking about one player. You've got 4 in. I mean, it's like if at the end, let's end it. I'm going to end the argument with this. I don't want to bore people anymore with this. But the reality is this: if they folded for Nylander, why wouldn't they fold for Marner? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, Nylander played it out, and and I would rather them trade. I think Nylander's less of an important player on that team than Marner is.
Possible.
Well, the funny thing is that they had more control over Nylander, and they decided to keep him. And in this situation, they have less control over Marner, and they want to trade him because another year went by that they lost,
and it's his fault.
How many times do I have to say it, Eck? It's not his fault specifically. It's the fact that they're paying 4 players $46 million. All
right, we
got. They can't win with 4 players making that much, making more than 50% of your cap.
One of them has 1 more year left, Mike.
Yes, one of them 1 more year left.
And Jan, there's another year that you're wasting of your core group.
But
in
the
their
cap
prime.
has gone up by $4.5 million.
It doesn't matter. They have to, Jan. They have to find a starting goalie and at least 2 top 4 defensemen to have a chance to get out of the first round, let alone be a Stanley Cup contender. And they can't do that with Mitch Marner making $11 million. They can't. So okay, let's end it there.
All right, we'll end it there. All right, let's go to go back.
Yeah, one or two more.
One or two more players on the rumor chart real quick while I'm here. So you can check it out for yourself at HockeyBuzz.com on the rumor chart. But let's talk about a kind of interesting player, Dylan DeMelo. Okay, who I know not many people think of that, him too much, Winnipeg defenseman, right?
But right shot defenseman.
Right shot defenseman, right? Which Mike, that's why Toronto is on the list because they're always on the list for right shot defenseman.
Yeah. I've heard his name, but I think it's more the fact that he won't be overly expensive.
He won't be over expensive. I have Toronto, Winnipeg, and because Winnipeg's going to try it again, keep him there for sure.
Yeah, I think they'll try.
I've heard that too. Philadelphia, Boston, a couple teams that and Philly is a weird one for us because we've talked about this. Like, I don't know why the Flyers would do this because they have these young guys.
Well, they're not going to do it if they sign Eric Johnson because then they'll have like 10 defensemen and they can't do it.
Right.
But if they sign Eric Johnson, then they're done signing defensemen.
You just gave Mike a heart attack there and made him apoplectic with that comment.
No. I just find it hilarious that they're gonna sign another aging, slow defenseman. He's a right shot. He was a liability for most of the year, except on the penalty kill and in the locker room. He's a good leader and a good guy. But
if he came at the right price, I could see Boston doing this.
But on the ice, Eric Johnson was a liability for most of the season.
Yeah, I'd say for half of it.
And the other guy I'll talk about is Christopher Tanev, whose stock rose quite a bit in the playoffs because he showed that he was probably the best defenseman on the Dallas Stars for a lot of the playoffs. And he
clearly was because without him they
couldn't win without him, right? Yeah. New Jersey, Dallas, Philly, Nashville, LA, Seattle,
Toronto.
I didn't hear Toronto yet.
No, you're going to hear it.
So he's going to be super expensive. So
yeah, but Treliving has a connection with him going back to Calgary.
Sure, he won him.
He's from Toronto, and there's a lot of chatter. I'll just say that he wants to come back. He wants to come to Toronto.
Sure, but what if Dallas offers him $6 million? Are they going to pay him $6 million?
Well, New Jersey could offer him $7. He really is.
Well, if it gets to the point of ridiculous's, then sure.
Well, but that's when the cap goes up $5 million. That's what happens sometimes.
But I don't think $7 is ridiculous for Tanev at all. Like, I don't think if he's a top 2 defenseman,
$7 million
for a top 2 defenseman is going to be about the normal rate.
Remember Christian Ehrhoff? How much extra money did he get?
Don't you think that how many top 2 defensemen in this league right now make $6 million? Quite a few.
Right, but not many of them are defensive defensemen who can't score. And Tanev, as good defensively as a shutdown guy he is, he's not an offensive juggernaut.
He's not an offensive player, but in a way,
no, but he's an intimidator and he's a shot blocker, and
he's more of a rarity too. Because we have a ton of defensemen that are offensive defensemen. We're not because 10 years ago everybody became an offensive defenseman because we didn't have any in the NHL. Now, what you're doing is you're seeing the opposite going to happen. Now you're going to see all these guys try to be defensive defensemen, right? So Tanev's kind of on the front line of that because he's one of the better young.
Right. I think Carolina would be in on him.
Yeah, Carolina would be on him. They will. I think they will be on him. I haven't heard anything about them being on him yet, but yeah, I would think they would be. That would make some sense.
I'm not guaranteeing 100% that the Leafs will get Tanev, but he should be on the list and he should be one of the favorites.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think he will end up on the list. It's just not. I haven't put him on there yet. But just because I haven't heard anybody mention him yet, like is anybody that I
Right.
And Michael Cohen in the chat, you mentioned HockeyBurg one more time, I'm going to ban you for life.
I mean, there's multiple guys mentioning Jeff Finger, so whatever.
Elias Lindholm, last name I'll throw out there. Another UFA who's going
Jeff
to be he's in center, one of the top centers out there. Is going to be Elias Lindholm.
I don't know. I mean, for me personally, my like for Elias Lindholm is dropping. He's a good player, but he's not a great player. Yeah, and I think there's a real chance for him to get overpaid. I don't know what Jan thinks, but he's usually good on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think hindsight's always 20/20. When you're offered a big deal, sometimes, as the line goes, when a pig becomes a hog, that's when it's slaughtered. He basically thought he was being underpaid. Turns out that was probably a more than fair deal and maybe even overpayment by Calgary at the time. And he was in a perfect situation and decided to play out the market. And we've seen way too many examples of that happening in the recent past.
Yeah.
I will be stunned if he's not a Boston Bruin.
Boston number one for me too, Mike. So I do believe that, but 30%, but at 25%, I have Buffalo. And I've heard Buffalo with a big interest in him as well.
No, Buffalo will not get into the top 6 free agent market. They're more than likely. That's not where Kevin Adams is wanting to spend his money. They're going to be going after the Dakota Joshuas and maybe trading for guys like Scott Lawton or Pavel Buchnevich on a short term. They don't want to, because Lindholm is going to want 8 years. Or 7 years or something like that. He's not going to get that from Buffalo. Buffalo will not offer him. The guys they'll give 8-year contracts to are J.J. Peterka or Jack Quinn or Zach Benson. They're not going to sign a free agent outside the organization for 8 years.
He may have a hard time getting that from anybody, to be honest. I mean, that's the thing, though.
Whether
Lindholm, I think stock did drop a lot, Russ. I think you're right about that. I think
I think it is dropping.
People expected him to come into Vancouver and do something more than he did, and
he did pretty well in the playoffs. If you didn't,
he did pretty well, but he looked relatively normal on Vancouver. He didn't look like he was standing out like anything like special. I think that's the problem when you get a guy like that.
Well, he's a good second line center. He's not a top line center.
Yeah, I mean, but he's also going to be with like Marcia Show, right? Marcia Show's going to be out there, and he's going to be. Probably give
so I mean, it's clear that he wants to go back to Vegas. He's basically on bended knee saying, "Sign me, please."
Vegas isn't super happy. They're not.
They don't have the cap space.
I know.
Listen, I just looked up a contract. I thought the Rangers overpaid on Brian Skrudland, and it was 3 years, $5 million, and I think they overpaid on that.
Yeah, right. There you go.
And that was back in the day.
Mike Keane.
Yeah,
Bobby Holik.
Oh yeah,
Keane and Skrudland went the same year. So,
Scott Gomez, Chris Drury.
Listen, at that point I was still in the working world, and I asked Al Morganti about it because I saw him at a Hooters, and he liked those players for the Rangers, and we were all wrong because I was just
says Al Morganti like Hooters.
Saw him at Hooters. Well, we'll leave on that.
I was eating lunch at Hooters, and Al Morganti was there.
Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Find Russ at your local Hooters everywhere. We'll talk to you again soon. Enjoy game 2. It's going to be a fun one for sure. Have fun.